Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, finally back with more videos. It's been a crazy month. I've already updated on social media, so I'm not getting into it. Let's just get into the card. So I'm starting with Canson XL watercolor paper. And this stamp set is by Studio Katia, and it's called the Sunshine of Hope stamp set. And this was designed to raise awareness and funds for the Save the Children Foundation to help support everything that's going on in the Ukraine right now. There's more info on the Studio Katia website for that. There is also a coordinating wafer die. I will have links to both. So I'm starting with the sunflower image, and I had used my anti-static powder tool on the watercolor paper. And then I'm inking up this stamp with my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and inking it up and stamping it a couple times to get all that detail. And then I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder. It doesn't have to be heat embossed, like I always say. For me, it's habit. And I always love the raised edge. It keeps things a little more contained when I am watercoloring. And in this case, because I use clear embossing powder, it also adds a shine to it, which I'll show at the end. And it just kind of makes the image stand out even a little bit more. So after I'd coated it with the clear embossing powder, I melted that with my heat tool. And then I'm only going to tape down two sides of this because I showed at the beginning there, I was kind of lining up the stamp because I plan on die cutting this with a Slimline wafer die, which just barely clears the top and bottom of this piece because I just grabbed a piece from my package that had already been cut down, So the taping it to the hardboard helps it from warping a bit, and also just kind of helps keep things in place and contained. So after I taped it down, I have my Simon glass media mat here. I'm actually really liking using this mat for as a palette, and I've shown this in a bunch of videos recently because of the white surface. It's easier to see my colors and whatnot. And because it's glass, it's super easy to clean, So I am squeezing or smooshing a bunch of different colors of Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks onto this. And I will have links to each of the specific ink colors that I used. I'm really liking these for watercolor. So after I'd smushed everything, my first step is to paint the background. Really, really simple. All I do is wet the entire background area with clean water and a paintbrush. Right now I'm just using one of my cheapy Tonic Nouveau paintbrushes. So I just wet the area with paintbrush. Wetting it with clean water just means that the color will move a little bit more. I'm not concerned with getting a perfect smooth background, not in the least. But that is one of the ways you would achieve that, is getting it all wet first before coming in with whether it's your inks or watercolors, whatever you're using. But I just put the water there so things move around, but I'm not worried about it being perfect because you guys know I like it to be messy. It's honestly, as crazy as it sounds when you first start with watercolor, it's easier to be messy than it is to keep things contained and smooth and perfect. And like I always say, perfection's overrated. But yeah. I started with the lightest color, which was SEAFOAM. And then after I'd added that and things are still wet, I'm going in with Ocean, which is my the darkest of those ink trios. And I'm putting that closest to the image and then letting it, kind of fade out, pulling it out, getting it a little bit splotchy, that sort of a thing. I'm not worrying about going over the lines into the image at all. I did in a couple spots, not a big deal. So after I did that, I switched to my little Tim Holtz Distress mini water brush. I don't know why. I've been kind of obsessed with using that lately, even though, again, anyone who's worked with water brushes, you just kind of know, you kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. They can be great. They can also be extremely finicky and, pool water everywhere. I don't know what it is. Lately, I've just been loving it. So that's what I've been using. Don't ask me why. It's just a weird kick, and then I'll go on to some other weird kick. But anywho, the first layers are very pale. That's another thing I learned the more I did watercolor is you get the intensity and the saturation of the color by layering. And I know it always sounds cliche because I get a lot of comments about this, like, I wish I could watercolor like you. It honestly just takes practice. I don't remember how many years it's been since I started doing watercoloring, but trust me, like when I started, I was so frustrated, so frustrated, you know, things weren't working. And I was like, how am I, you know, everything looks so faded and, you know, things aren't going the way I want them to, or they're not working and it's not looking the way I want to. Practice. The more you do it, the more you start figuring it out. And my biggest, you know, some of my biggest little discoveries is layering the colors. So as I'm laying, you can see the colors start getting more intense. Like I'm going in with darker colors, but I'm still working in layers. So I used Lemonade and Sunbeam ink. And then I had went in with Mandarin, which is an orange. And then I went back in with Citrine, which is the darkest of the yellow in the trios. And that really intensified it. And then I went back in with a bit more Mandarin, and I was just dotting that orange, you know, to get that texture and that speckly look that I really like. And then with the center, I used Latte and Mocha. And same thing, after they dried, I went back in and added more of the Mocha. And I'm even taking a bit of that Mocha here and adding it to the base of all those petals. And it just, you know, deepens it and adds a bit of shading and that sort of a thing. And then after everything was dry, and I sped that up with my heat tool. You can always let it air dry, but I'm impatient. I used yellow ink was on my little palette, and I swirled my brush through it, added splatter, dried that splatter, and then I'm going in with more splatter. This time with white gouache, and then of course some Perfect Pearl powder that I mix with water. And then again, let everything completely dry. And I'll show at the end the shimmer of that Perfect Pearl powder splatter. It is chef's kiss. So perfect. So everything is dry. So now I'm going to use this is one of Simon's mini slimline rectangle wafer dies. And I die cut that panel. And I also pulled out this Studio Katia Spring Pastels Polka Slimline. Slimline? Yes. Slimline pattern paper. How cute is this paper? And yeah, it's pastel rainbow fabulousness. So I took one of the papers, and I also die cut that with a larger mini slimline rectangle wafer die, because that'll like matte my watercolor piece. And then for the sentiment, I have a piece of vellum here, and I'm going to put it in my MISTI, and I'm going to line up one of the sentiments from that Sunshine of Hope stamp set. And then same thing, I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool. This time I'm going to stamp the sentiment with clear embossing ink, and then I'm going to coat this with detail white embossing powder this time. So after it's been stamped, cover it with the embossing powder, melt it with my heat tool, which takes no time at all. Embossing powder melts on vellum way faster than anything else, so just pay attention to that, because you can immediately warp and then burn vellum because it's so thin. So I melted that, trimmed that down with my paper trimmer, and then my card base is Simon's 120 pound heavyweight cardstock. This is why I have washi tape on the side of my guillotine trimmer. The edge of the washi tape marks the 6 1/4 inch mark, and then I have a line on the washi tape that marks 6 1/2 inches. This piece of cardstock I cut down to 6 1/4 inches square, and then I'm scoring it at 3 1/8 inch. So this will be a 3 1/8 by 6 1/4 inch mini slimline card, because that is the exact size of the largest of the wafer dies in this mini slimline rectangles wafer die set. Say that 3 times fast. Anyway, and I literally I have this all like listed in front of me on my screen so that I can remember. Anywho, I wrapped the vellum sentiment around that panel, taped it in place with washi tape because no one's going to see it in the end. And then I grabbed my card base again, and I had already cleaned off that sunflower stamp because I'd used it with that Nocturne ink. And I'm going to fold my card base inside out, and I'm going to line that stamp up on the inside of my card. And then I'm going to stamp that with, I think I use Sunbeam ink for this. So stamp it in just this cheerful yellow ink. And then after I had stamped that, I'm going to stamp another sentiment from this set. I love the sentiments, and just, I love the font. I don't know. I love this set. It's so, I don't know. I love Studio Katia. She makes the best products. Anyway, stamp the sentiment. And then there's two options for the word sending. There's a large kind of scripty one, and then there's a little one. I lined up the little one and stamped that. So it's the inside says sending a little sunshine your way. So then after the inside was stamped, folded the card back the way it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to glue the pattern paper panel to this card front with just a bit of craft tacky glue, because that always gives me a few seconds, you know, of wiggle room to make sure things are lined up. So once I've got that adhered, I had covered the back of the watercolor panel with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. So it's got that little bit of dimension, but it will also not be too thick and bulky. So peel off the backing for that. And then I'm going to stick this onto the card front. And then once that's in place, of course, I'm going to add some bling, especially when it's Studio Katia stuff, because that was the first thing I fell in love with her brand was the bling. And I literally have trays of this stuff. So the bling I'm using today is some iridescent bubbles. I have the bubbles of the regular size, which is a mix of actually 3 sizes, I think, and the iridescent tiny bubbles, which are very, very tiny. And I love them. And they're perfect for floral images. They're perfect for everything. I've used them in a bajillion videos. Anyway, I lined up my bling. I went light on the bling. Didn't want to cover it and go too crazy. So only added a few. And I'm going to adhere those into place with dabs of craft tacky glue. And then once those are adhered into place, I'm going to pair this card with one of Simon's Island Blue envelopes. Just kind of another nod to the colors of the Ukraine flag. So once this was done, now you can see that shimmer splatter and the shine from the image. And then on the inside, got it just stamped so you can see all the detail and the sentiment. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a supply list, a link to all the supplies I used, so you can check that out if you were interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting, click the bell for notifications. Stay tuned, because now that I'm back, I'm going to be back with a vengeance. I have a ton of videos coming. So I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.